Hey everyone, and welcome to the Human Design Podcast with me, your host, Emma Dunwoody. I'm a qualified master coach and human behaviour specialist, as well as being a qualified human design coach. And I work with clients every single day to answer the big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And what is my purpose? I also assist them to transition from the person they think they should be to the person they really are on the inside. I teach people how to actually live their design instead of just knowing it. And if this is something that you want to do too, well, stay tuned or reach out for private coaching or Human Design Unpacks, where I show you exactly how to live your design. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. Now, today I have an expert that I was lucky enough to have a session with, and we're going to be talking about breath work. And breath work for me personally, it's quite funny. And I think, Iona, I might have shared this with you in our session, but in case I didn't, breathing was actually something that used to properly freak me out. Like it used to, the moment I put my attention on my breathing, I would feel anxiety. And I did panic disorder for many years. So like kind of everything gave me anxiety, but breath was something really specific. So today I'm so super pumped to introduce all of you out there to Iona Holloway, who is a breathwork expert, so that we can sort of dive into the power of breathwork and really talk about how that can integrate with our human design. So welcome, Iona.
Thank you so much for having me, Emma. I'm really happy to be here. And what you said is so normal. I don't mean to like jump in.
Please jump away.
I think that it's such a common thing when we're not even necessarily conscious of it, but we have been living disembodied or sort of floating outside of our physical selves. There's so many reasons for that. We might not even realize that's been the way that we've been living our lives. So it doesn't surprise me that inhabiting your breathing at first was something that brought up some resistance, and I see that all the time with people, and that's why I'm such a big fan of not just like chucking people in the deep end, but really like soft ramp into exploring these tools. And then as your comfort level and base of support within yourself increases, really seeing how you can start playing with it to utilize it as a kind of power tool.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I'm going to get you to introduce yourself, but I just have to add one little thing because I can't help myself. And, you know, that's this piece where I just remember whenever I would pay attention to my breath, it was like the moment I became conscious of it, it was like I had to control it. And that used to freak me out. Like, what if I stop? What if I'm not doing it right? And I had this situation when my eldest son was, he wasn't even 2 yet. And he had to be airlifted by helicopter to the Royal Children's. And I'm sitting on this helicopter with my baby, you know, strapped up to oxygen on my lap. And the doctors literally said to me, like, just calm your breathing, stop breathing so much. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I was calming myself down by paying attention to my breathing. But actually I was, you know, heightening my anxiety because I was trying too hard to breathe. So I'm super, super excited to have this conversation because I know breathing sounds simple. We often talk about it's the easiest thing we do. It's how we can tap into our abundance, you know, like all of these things. But for a lot of us, me included, it hasn't always been easy, even though if I ignore it, it's easy. But if I think about it, it's challenging. So before we get to that, can you please introduce yourself? Tell everyone a little bit about your story as for everyone out there, self-directed projector, 6'3" profile. Can you tell them a little bit about your story of, you know, potentially like, where did this come? Where was that point where you were like, okay, something in my life's got to change that's brought you to who you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I think that, I feel like when we've chatted before, maybe your own ramp into this work and exploring it for yourself was finding a way to unhook yourself from the struggles that you were having. And my ramp into inner work and then into breath work was similar. So I actually wrote a book about this, my book Ghosts, but I would say 20 years had what would be probably medically diagnosed as an eating disorder. It was something that I struggled with deeply from a really young age. And it was something that hid in plain sight, primarily because I spent most of my life in very highly competitive sporting environments. That was actually path over to the US from Scotland, was getting recruited to play Division 1 hockey in college here, which was a big deal, and perhaps bigger than I realized at the time. So a lot of the ways that I struggled hid in plain sight, and in many ways helped me. Like the intensity of it really actually pushed me in many ways towards achieving. But like all kind of unsustainable things in that way, I eventually broke. Like my strategy stopped working. My whole life was revolving around my weight, what I was eating. I could barely see myself in the mirror, speaking about disembodied, very just like outside of self. And it was bizarre to spend so much time focused on the external presentation of the physical body, but to be completely devoid of actually inhabiting it and living in it. So I'm 33 now, but at 29, I was kind of on the floor of my life. I call it the reckoning. And it was just one of those things where I was forced to change. Like it truly was a rock bottom. I don't think we all need one of those, but intensity definitely forces clarity, and it did for me. And I felt very strongly, especially it just become, or I was about to become an aunt. And I just did not want to bleed this into the next generation of women in my family. So I really took that year, my 29th year, to get deep into inner work. I'd always struggled with traditional therapy. I'd had a couple of really bad experiences. Caveat, I know that that's not true for everyone. And I think that whatever you find that works is wonderful. But I ended up in sort of an inner work coaching program. There was a focus on breath work, and my life just transformed. I was surrendered. And when you're surrendered, you can lean in and you're open. And so that year really changed the trajectory of my life. And then over the following years, I decided that this was the gift that I was going to get to share with the world in whatever way it came through me. And I think I'm still discovering that. And I'm a responsible adventurer. So I have my kind of fingers in a few different things. I have my inner work company, Brave Thing, where I really focus on clearing the blind spots. I work with a lot of strong, creative women, either to get their creative projects like books or businesses out in the world or flourishing in the world. And then Soul is my latest sort of incarnation of my work. Breathwork was a huge part of my journey, but also for the women that I deeply connect with. And as a projector, we're not for everyone, but for those that we see clearly, we can just be of so much value. And I found that for a lot of my more projector clients, breathwork was just an incredible, it's great for everyone. But there was an intensity to the way that it worked with their systems that I was just fascinated by. So Soul is not a projector app, but it channels a lot of the things that I have grown to understand are ways that I can share my gift with the world, my voice, talking very specifically, helping people see things very clearly. And so the app came to be, I was invited by someone who actually was an app developer who was on my mailing list. And I knew him from kind of not a past life as in a few years ago. And he got back in touch and invited me to be, if I was interested to work on an app. And he was like, you're the face of it, you're the voice of it, but I'll build the system to help the channel for it to come through. And so that's what we've been working on with Soul. It's a breathwork app designed to help you think clearer, love deeper, and sleep like a rock. I think we can all get richer in that asset. And just been really focusing on introducing people to breathwork, kind of clearing up any confusion around what it is, separating it from meditation because they're not the same things, although they can be beautifully complementary. But also breathwork's a wonderful path into introspection if sitting down to meditate, you don't have access to it right now, or you're finding it difficult to shut your mind off. Breathwork has such a powerful way to drop you into your body first.
Oh my God, I love all of that.
yeah, that's the story and how it came to be.
And so much. Thank you so much that I want to sort of dive into there. I definitely want to talk about the book. I definitely want to talk about like, what is breath work? Let's start from the basics. Let's talk about the difference between breath work and meditation. You know, one thing for me, as I just said before I hit record, like I've just been practicing breath work through the Headspace app, which is what I use. And it really does help me quiet my mind. On my busy days, my mind is much harder to quieten down, but that's really been super supportive. The other thing I just want to do is I want to just jump into the whole human design thing. I think it's really fascinating that a 6-3 profile, you know, in your 29th year was this year that you're like, oh my God, I need to, like, something needs to shift and change. Right before that, moving into the on the roof moment, you know, it's like a belated Saturn return for you. I think that's really fascinating. And then for those of you who are listening, oh my goodness, all the language you were using about creativity, your voice, helping people, you know, bring their creativity into the world. You know, the 1-8 is the only channel that you have. And this is really what it's all about. And you actually also have it in your design Mars, in your design Jupiter, which are two places there that we find prosperity as well. So it's really fascinating just to hear you absolutely speak your design, you know. I love what you said about projectors, and I want to actually take it one step further, because I agree with you. I don't think it is just a projector tool, but I think where it does really have a big impact, and I know for me personally, even though I'm a manifesting generator, I only have 4 centers defined. So I have a lot of open space. And I really feel that the breath work, in my experience, and as a line 3, that's what I'm here to sort of pull out. In my experience, it's those open centers that I feel like the breath work really helps and supports me, which is why it would work so well for projectors. And for all of you out there that can hear Alice in the background, Justin just left and she wanted to go too, so she's having a bit of a whinge. So if she doesn't calm down, we'll have to put her out in a minute. So just loving it, everything that you're saying. So let's just start at the beginning. Like, what specifically is breath work? You know, when I think of breath work, the first person that comes to mind is Wim Hof. You know, I think about, you know, his breathing, but you know, it's become so incredibly popular. It's kind of everywhere. So could you just start us at the beginning? Like, what specifically is breath work and what's the purpose of it?
Yeah, sure. And I think Wim Hof's anyone that mainstreams anything that's a wee bit quote alternative, I think is great. He's got a hyper masculine expression of breath work, which is cool, and I think perfect for those that are drawn to him. But for me, the way that I don't want people to think that in order to do breath work, they have to do cold exposure, or they have to go into or they have to really blow their minds to get the benefits of it. Because the way that breath work is simply the intentional inhabitation of your breath using different durations of patterns and holds. And when you work on it on a nervous system level, you're actively operating your system. So you're either potentially dropping it out of what you've talked about, that sort of that anxious state, that hyper aroused state, or you're raising yourself up from numbness or shutdown or the system hibernating. And that's the beautiful thing also about the nervous system is it's somewhat plastic. So we all know, or perhaps we don't, but what we have tolerance for, what we have access to in our life is deeply impacted by the beliefs and stories that we hold to be true about ourselves and the capacity that we have in our body to experience intensity. And I like to call that the window of tolerance, or not I like to call that's coined by Stephen Porges, who did a lot of polyphagal theory. But the idea is that we have this general window of tolerance that we experience our life through. But things like stories, beliefs, and then also trauma, the wear and tear, the micro tears, and sometimes the big tears that happen to our psyche and soul over the years can really reduce how much space we have, how much capacity we have to experience intensity. And when I say intensity, I mean just like working with fear, feeling the fullness of love, like being able to work with anxiety without feeling like we're losing our body or that we're not even present. And then also writing the lows as well, of like if we're feeling sad, not dropping out of our life, but being able to stay present and with ourselves. And the cool thing about breathwork is that we can heal perhaps our system that has been shaped and changed by things that have happened to us over our life, and through the lens of abundance, prosperity, creativity, we just have more space to play. And breathwork's a beautiful way to increase the size of that window and drop us into different states of being.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. And as you were speaking, I was kind of running through all my experiences, and my early experiences were that discomfort, that window, when I was doing depression and panic disorder, my window was tiny. I just wanted to kind of literally hold my breath, stay still, and just hope I could get through the day. Where one of the things I kind of notice now is, over all the years and all the work and all the things that I've poured into myself, sitting with uncertainty or discomfort, my window is so much bigger now. And I think what's really cool is, and we've been doing red light saunas and ice baths. So, just being able to sit in that place where, and funnily enough, I actually find the sauna more uncomfortable than I find the ice bath.
Yeah.
Like it's this thing for me that
I'm the same.
And like I get to the end of the timer in the sauna, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to get out. Whereas in the ice bath, I'm like, I'm fine, I'm fine. And I'm sure because the ice bath is so, like, it has such a physical experience that you have no choice but to be super present with it and super present with your with your breathing. Whereas with the sauna, I think for me, it's like, and it's funny, if I'm on my own, I'm fine. But if I'm with someone else, it kind of tends to freak me out. And when I'm in that zone, what I think is fascinating, and I think this is kind of what you're sort of alluding to with the breath work is, and I definitely experienced this when I had my session with you, is that all of these stories that we tell ourselves that we mightn't be super consciously aware, they all come up in that moment. So you actually get to see how you stop yourself, how you run away, I was saying to a client just yesterday, like, one of my fundamental beliefs since my depression and anxiety, which was literally, I was diagnosed nearly 20 years ago now, and, completely healed, and I've been completely healed for over a decade. But one of the rules I've always lived by is, like, just stay in the room. All you got to do is stay in the room. And, like, that might be, okay, if I'm going to meditate, I just have to stay in the room. So oftentimes when I go through experiences, and when I was doing the breathing session with you, I noticed all of my unconscious mind be very conscious, be really, really clear of all the stories that it tells me to get me to quit on something or run away or whatever it is. So would you say that, breath work, is this another way that we can sort of, in that process, and it definitely felt like to me in that process that I was like seeing them and like, oh, hey, old friend, it's you again, and just sort of letting them go. It really helped me. I felt it really helped me release a lot of, old fears that I necessarily didn't know were even still in there, to be honest. So do you find that with breath work, that it is a way that people can start to let go and shift those fears, or really become conscious of the fears that are stopping them?
Oh yeah, I love that you brought this up, especially this concept of staying in the room, because this is something that, so on the Soul app, there's two main sort of experiential tracks. One are the longer, like, soul sessions or breathwork journey that you and I did in our session, breathing for a slightly longer period of time, maybe 10 to 25 minutes. And that's where you're really working with stuck and stored stories, memories, and beliefs in the body. You're inhabiting the breath, allowing that to take your mind offline so that the subconscious and unconscious can rise, and then you can meet it. And sometimes it comes in the form of like almost like a written story, or you see a story, or you'll see someone, or you'll see a memory, or you'll see something that kind of brings you into the experience. And that's that more kind of spiritual, psychedelic side of breathwork, which people are always like, oh my God, I want that experience. And that's beautiful. And I love that form of breathwork. And to your point around staying in the room, so much resistance can come up in breathwork. I remember you didn't experience that, and we chatted a bit about that. Like, you dropped in really fast, and some people have that access, and it's just, and some people don't, and it's cool. Which is
crazy. Like, I just want to just jump in and say, for all the listeners out there, like, that is not, like, for the want of a better word, normal. For, like, I've done years to be okay to like, and a lot of people would have been able to drop in faster than me. So if you are someone who has tried it and hasn't been able to, like, please just stick at it, because, you know, I only did that because I've really wrestled and made friends and let go of a lot of my unconscious stories.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Again, from that plastic sense, it's just like gentle exposure in a consent-based and safe place is the way to go with tolerating that kind of thing. But to what you were saying around staying in the room, I will say to people, you can always leave. I'll never force you must stay on to someone, but I'll also say, where else are you running? So you practice, I like to say you practice your life here. When we're practicing breath work, we're practicing life. So if we're running, if we're running from this experience and it's just the intentional use of breathing, and we're already coming up with, I can't, or I don't like this, or God, Iona is so damn annoying, I wish she would shut up, I'm just going to turn this off, I'm just going to walk out. These patterns are most likely in some form or another running through your life also, and taking 100%. You out of experiences where you're on that edge of something, like you're on that edge of discomfort. And so we can practice that in an environment that feels safe and inhabiting our breath that way. You are expanding your capacity. You are showing yourself that in moments of intensity, you don't leave, you stay with things. And through the process of breathwork, because it is an embodied practice, like our bodies are scrapbooks, so they are compacted stories and beliefs, and some would call that trauma. But if we're staying present and actively working through those, yes, like we have access to release. So that's that beautiful, like, experiential journey that you can go on a deeper soul session. But the other part of breathwork, which I think is also just as, and if not more valuable, and also a really nice entry point for people, if you're like, I don't know if I want to go straight in with a 25-minute session with Iona, who I listened to for the first time on a podcast, and now I have her app on my phone. Like, so that's why we have the state changes, which are 5 to 15 minutes. And this is even bringing up sort of echoes of what we were talking about how I was initiated into inner work. Intensity can often force us into action. But on the day-to-day, sometimes we're not feeling intensity. Sometimes we're feeling blah. Like sometimes we're feeling just kind of blocked, or we're feeling muddy, or we're feeling just like unsure. And I always like to think of like muddy emotion, uninspired. Like muddy emotions are often the deep collision of desire and fear. Yeah. Like, or we're just lacking a bit of oomph to get going. And that's why we also have, and I love teaching state changes to people. So shifting from blocked to energized, or shifting from anxious to calm, or from that numb feeling. So I was not someone that ever really experienced the sort of intense or consistent anxiety in my life, but I was shut down. Like I was so hibernated in my life. And so for someone like me, who has a tendency, if I'm falling to the bottom of my window or of capacity, to numb or to feel emotionally sort of numb and flat, a spark plug, like something that can bring me up and back into energy, that's a beautiful state change for me. And so that's why I love the two. Those feel like two very clear but important usages. Clearing a fear and story, yes, but on the day-to-day, shifting my state, moving from this to that, never letting myself feel like I'm stuck in any feeling, because emotions are just energy. They can transform and move, and breathing is just the fastest way that we can do that.
I really love what you're saying, because I think one of the biggest challenges in the personal development world is that people dive in and they're all about their conditioning and their belief systems and their shadow, and they spend all their time focusing their reticular activating system on what is, inverted commas, wrong with them. And this is one of the things that I think actually it's not overly supportive, because I know for me with all my programs, the way I teach is like, we do all the shadow work, we do all of that, but we always end up with gratitude. We always reprogram the reticular activating system to focus on what we want. And we don't do it over and over and over again, because, there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of that work. And I've had so many clients doing that. And they're like, oh, I just don't know what's wrong with me. And I'm like, what do you mean? You've just spent 3 weeks, diving around in your shadow. Like, you're actually creating more of it. So I think what's so important is that we have these opportunities to change our state, and to get back in our body, because we can get very much just as trapped in our healing journey as we can in our thriving journey or our depression or whatever it is. Like, there's a lot of people out there that are just addicted to that. So I think that it's super important to have these opportunities to get, tapped back in, if you like, to our physical body. Like, what are we actually feeling? Because one of the things I hear a lot in my groups, the people that I teach, and probably because we attract who we are, and it was a really big lesson for me, is that, I realized a number of years ago that I thought my feelings. I didn't feel my feelings. I thought my feelings. So I love what you're saying about these little state changes, because they are the opportunities for us to actually go, no, but how am I actually feeling? How's my body actually feeling? I think that's really beautiful. And as you were talking as well, like just going into that, you were saying how you can be quite flat emotionally, and you don't have a defined solar plexus. So you do have this potential of being quite balanced emotionally. But in the same breath, one of the things I think is really fascinating about your story is that you didn't indulge in everyone else's emotion. You did the opposite. You completely resisted and pushed it away, and turned off your feeling. So you probably didn't have to feel everyone else's energy. Would that be fair to say?
Oh my goodness, yes. And it's been a wild thing to realize that I have empathy.
Yeah.
So much. That so much. I can read energy. I can walk into a room and sometimes I'll almost find it, it's not, I don't even know if it's necessarily emotions. It just feels like I'm seeing people very clearly. And as soon as they start talking, I'm like, story. And it's not that I'm doing it intentionally, and it's also not that I'm judging. And I'll often, I don't know if you're like this, but I'll often just like turn it down. Like, I'll actively, consciously turn it down, because it's not the state that degree of seeing is not the state that I want to be in on a Saturday afternoon.
Exactly. Oh my God, chilling. I love that.
But with my one-on-one clients, with my private clients, and then also when I'm recording the sessions for Soul, which sidetrack, I never script. I just like drop in and then speak, and I'll edit them ever so lightly, but mostly just to remove the odd M, or like hearing myself swallow. But they all feel like very channeled moments, and some of them are shorter and longer. But it's been a fascinating journey for me to realize that I lived 29 years of my life numb.
Yeah.
And separate from my soul, because my soul was never that. But the layers and layers of stories that I had about being this kind of ghostly, invisible, powerful in my sort of pain person. It's been such a, I don't want to say bizarre, it's just been an unraveling.
Yeah.
And a remembering.
I love that. I'm really fascinated, or curious, I should say. I'm really curious about that powerful in your pain. Do you want to talk a little bit more to that? Because I feel like, especially, my culture, and I kind of feel like what I know of the Scottish culture, it's quite similar, is that especially in Australia, and, it's changing, but there is this culture of like, my power does come from my pain. It comes from my adversity. It comes from my hard times. So I'd love to sort of hear you talk to that a little bit, because I actually think that, yes, there's power in those places, but we have to learn to transmute it into something that comes from love instead of fear, because most of the time that power is coming from fear.
Oh yeah, sure. And when I say power in my pain, like, it wasn't in any way a conscious thing. I was completely welded in it. And yeah, I love that you brought up Scotland. I think, I can't remember what comedian said it, but he said, like, in Scotland, we trade in sheep and threats. And I was definitely raised in that culture. Like, we are, by many, like, within the context of England, we are the oppressed nation. And it's in our blood. You feel it. We are this kind of dark humor, never giving anyone a compliment. I certainly was raised by kind parents, but not parents that showed emotion and love. So I never really feel like I developed in the way that perhaps like being able to experience that and feel it and give it freely. It doesn't really feel like something that I learned. And actually, I think the first time I really got hugged by someone was when I moved to the US.
Yeah.
Like true, like really hugged by someone. And then it was interesting as well, because just like getting involved in the US culture was such a shock for my system. Because I was raised in this kind of dark and sarcastic, but kind of humorous culture. And the US is very different. There's like an openness to it and an envelopingness to it that I also found incredibly disconcerting, and in many ways felt very phony as well.
Yeah.
It was a kind of odd thing. But yeah, growing up, it was just, and the power and the pain. So I was rewarded from a very young age. I got a lot of stories reflected back to me that my life was very easy because I was quick. I picked things up. I was often top of the class. And then I was also very good at sports. And so I got a lot of reality reflected back to me that I really had no right to complain about anything because my life was very easy. But it certainly didn't feel easy to be me. And it was interesting as well, and I don't know if you experience this with projector clients, but it wasn't so much that I ever tried to impress people. It more felt like I was trying to confirm their reality and perception of me. And the standard for that was perfect.
Yeah.
And by all intents and purposes, perfect is an impossible and inhuman standard. Yeah. And that's where I think a lot of the foods and body stuff came in, because that felt like this way that I could kind of initially exert even more control and dominance over myself. But I was an ultimate disappointment for myself because I ended up not being able to sustain it. And so I would end up in these really massively secretive binge starve cycles that ended up just totally sweeping me away, numbing me out, disconnecting me from my body. But I hid it really well. A lot of people were very surprised when they found out the depths to which I was struggling. But it was because I was still very highly functioning, but invisibly struggling a lot.
Yeah, I think, thank you so much for sharing. I resonate so much with your story. You know, I joke, I actually had a friend who taught me how to hug, because I grew up, my mum is Scottish, and I grew up in a very similar household, and always being told, just be grateful for what you've got, and you know, all of those sort of things. So I really, really resonate with everything that you're sharing. And I think that this happens a lot, you know, that people on the outside, I had so many friends when I was diagnosed with depression and panic disorder. I had so many, and I'm talking my best friends were like, you of all people, you. And I'm like, because from such a young age, I had to keep my shit together. You know, I had to learn how to just be in control. And, you know, like, you talking about you being able to control your food, of course, you know, this is the number one reason for eating disorders, is that, you know, people feel out of control in their life. So this is something they can control. So yeah, thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about,
can I say, do you mind if I say one thing?
Oh my
God,
jump in.
It was something that you said earlier, which I just love when I hear anyone bringing this topic to the fore, this idea of never being broken, really just doing the absolute best with incredibly adaptive strategies. I wanted to raise that because I never really I label the way that I survived in my life for 29 years as an eating disorder, because it's what people can latch onto and understand, like, oh right, okay, that was something that I can relate to, that maybe, or that feels like something that I might have had or danced on the edge with. But on, like, from my perspective, my understanding of it, having gone through all of this, is that was me regulating my system. That was me doing my absolute best to survive within the constraints and what felt like impossible pressure of my life, just in the same way that I'm actively operating my system now with breathing, in the way that I'm now clearing what that some of that created, but then also how I'm able to shift from state to state now by inhabiting my body with breath. It's just a different way of operating. And I think that whatever we can do to soften any of the shame around the ways that we are actively operating our system, whether that is with foods or drugs or alcohol or sex or whatever it is that we're using to find some degree of either control or feeling or sense or escape. When we can look at ourselves as just that, as people that are doing our best with tools that we currently have in our toolbox, and then understanding that we can bring in things like an understanding of human design and that lens and perspective. We can bring in tools like breathwork, and slowly, if we land in that work and let it integrate and sit in our systems, we can release. We can start to release the other things that we felt were necessary. So I did want to say that because there's so much shame in this world, and it's just painful, and it's unnecessary.
I so love what you just said as well. I absolutely 100% agree. We are all imperfectly perfect, and we're doing the best we can with what we've got. One of the things that I said, as I was going through depression and panic disorder, we were drinking every single night. I drank a lot of alcohol, but I actually think the alcohol was one of the things that helped me, almost stay sane. I would drink it and it would knock me out. And yes, I wouldn't necessarily have high quality sleep, but I would sleep a lot more than if I'd go to bed without it. And I oftentimes looked back and would be like, as much as all the textbooks tell me that it was an addiction and it wasn't serving me and it was making things worse, I oftentimes look back and go, well, you know what? I actually think it fucking saved me in many ways. And exactly what you said, all that happened was I got to a place where I found better tools. And then I became conscious that, I can choose better tools. I can choose, and better tools are something that, really serve and support my mind, body and soul, as opposed to the Band-Aid that perhaps the alcohol or the sex or the, like exercise addiction or the food addiction or whatever it is covering up, or it's being the support for. So I think that's a really, really important point, because we can tend, especially in the personal development world, we can tend to put labels on shit and go, oh my God, I did this thing and it was bad. And, we do what we need to do with what we have. And all we have to actually do is grow and evolve so we can work out what else we can use or how else we can heal, or what else we need that we don't necessarily know in the moment. So yeah, I think that's such a powerful point. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, that was you summed it up perfectly. I love it. Whenever, anything we can do to understand, it's an understanding of ourselves. I always say, am I on my own side? Am I sitting side by side with myself, or am I standing and pointing the finger at myself? And day to day, I'm always like, get on your own side, Iona. Whatever it is, get on your own side, because it's only from that place. Shame doesn't release shame. Pointing the finger at ourselves doesn't help us let go of something. Exactly. It's from a place of understanding, awareness, and then the release can go from there.
And it's that full integration. I think the one thing that we talk a lot about shadow work, but what does it actually mean? And all shadow work means is that we're integrating the parts of ourselves that we've rejected, So I love that metaphor, that am I sitting next to myself or am I pointing the finger? Because that's really that integration process. I love it. So for those people who haven't done breath work, or maybe like me, I just literally was like, oh, there's just a level of fear, because I don't know how my body's going to respond. And, what's the easiest way in to breath work? I know you've talked about these shorter experiences that change the state, but is there something maybe you can share right now that people could do just to clear their mind in a simple way?
Yeah, sure. So I would say there's two patterns that are beautiful ones to be aware of and that you can start with. So one is resonance breathing. And this is simply inhaling for 5 and exhaling for 5. So that's about 6 full inhales and exhales per minute. So this is resonance breathing. There's a track on Soul. But the beautiful thing about this rhythm, and it's cool, they actually did research on all sorts of different religions, all like from all sorts of different corners of the earth or backgrounds. And they found that when people, regardless of what the chanting were or the singing was for different tribes or religions, it would sync people into a very similar rhythm, which was this resonance breathing of 5-second inhale and 5-second exhale. And the beautiful thing about this pattern is that it syncs the different circulatory systems in the body. So breath and blood. So when we're able to settle into that, and the thing that I love about resonance breathing is it's invisible. You could be doing it right now while you're speaking to me, and I would never know. It's perfect for Zoom meetings.
I'm literally doing it now. Like as soon as you do, like the line between me is like just experimenting as you're speaking. Yeah, I love it.
Perfect for like a stressful, maybe in-law or, you know, a coworker, just like settling into that rhythm. It just opens your receptivity and it gently drops you into your body. And so it's also like a really cool one that you can teach kids.
I love
it's
that.
let's just settle in. And you can, as you're doing it, you can, it's like really gentle. Like it just drops you in, and you could do it for 3 minutes. You could do it for 10. I've sometimes gone for walks, because walking is another of my favorite tools, and I'll just settle into that with some of my favorite music for a while. So that's a beautiful sort of system regulator.
I love that. I just want to add, like, as you were speaking, I think, so one of the things that I've spoken a little bit about on the podcast, and it's sort of a relatively new practice, is is the heart-brain coherence. So, you know, you basically put your physical hand in some way on your heart space. You imagine breathing in and out through the heart space. Then you bring in you know, gratitude or something like that. You spend 3 minutes in this state and you're going to get that coherence. And as you're speaking, I'm like, oh my God, I'm adding that. I'm so adding that breathing, the resonance breathing to that. I feel like that could be really powerful.
Yeah. And I even love that you brought up the placement of the hands, because like, I don't know about you, but I was one of those people that, like, I would go to a yoga class and they would say, now we place our hand on our chest and on our belly, and I was like, no way am I doing that. That feels like, I just, don't tell me where to put my hands.
Yes, same.
But just thinking about, I'm just even thinking about today, like, when have I touched my own physical body? It's like it's so simple, as breathing is simple, but when are we actually doing it? When am I consciously saying, and this can also be a really cool thing where it's like, where does it feel good to put my hands? Like, I'll often end up finding mine just like resting on top of my legs, and then just breathing. And I've got like connection to my own body. Our own touch is such a healing thing in and of itself. Anything sensual, and like paired with breathing is amazing.
I love that.
So I love that one. And then the breath pattern that we did on our longer session, and it's the breath pattern I use a lot for the soul sessions, is the 3-part breath. So this is a double inhale and a single exhale, and all the breathing is through the mouth. So like, if you're watching this, it's belly, chest, out through the mouth. And so for longer sessions, which I would really recommend if you're going to drop in to do a guided session, like, cool, do that. But you can
really
also use
far out. And it was nice to feel safe. I think that was the big part for me. Is why I dropped in, is because I felt safe. I felt like, okay, because weird shit does happen in your body, and I want to talk about that too. But please keep going.
And when you're doing it for a longer period of time, totally, I recommend the support of just even a voice is a very regulating thing. But you can use this 3-part breath. You do it for 3 to 5 minutes. You can do it seated, and it's a fast system reset. So if you put on maybe your favorite slightly upbeat song and just settle into for 3 minutes, you could do it seated. You could lie down if you want to as well. But that's a really great fast system reset. And we've got one of those on the app as well.
Yeah, I've been doing that too, with just before my meditation, and it's just been so good to just calm the mind, because I'm now, I don't do a lot of guided meditation anymore. So if I'm super busy, it takes time for my mind to just settle. So I found that 3-part breathing has been really helpful to, start the meditation like I would on a day that I'm not working, where my mind's a lot calmer. So I think that's really beautiful. Anything you want to add on that? And then I want to ask you about the weird shit that breathing does to your body and your mind and your psyche and stuff.
I love some weird shit. Let's do that.
So I'm always fascinated with, and it's also been this part of why I was afraid of things like meditation and breathwork and those things, in my early days, because they do change your state. They do change your level of consciousness. So with breathing, and I've not ever really had a mystic experience, but I would love to sort of hear, like, are there certain, like maybe something that has been a part of, I don't know, like ancient wisdom or something, breathing methods or practices, that's what I was looking for, that can help us to sort of access the more mystic energies that live inside of us. Because I know when we did our session, it's very rare these days that I do sessions with people and I actually experience a lot of emotion, because I've just done so much work. And I know that when we did that longer breath session, it was, I can't remember what the question was that you asked. You asked a question and it was like my entire body just went, and I just, started sobbing, and it really released whatever it was. So I just love to hear like those more sort of mystic or those deeper experiences that oftentimes we don't let ourselves go to, or we go the opposite and we sign up to do, sit with ayahuasca or do something like that, where it's kind of like once we're in. So I'd love to hear about how breath work can take us on those sort of journeys.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, I think we were working with forgiveness. Yeah. Forgiveness around perhaps your body or parts of it. And I think I remember seeing you get emotional at that point. But yeah, so in terms of weird shit, it's so fascinating, because I also think that this can be impacted by perhaps some of the more like sunken or hidden abilities that we have within ourselves that we don't even have access to. So for example, some people that I do breath work with will see auras, or they'll be communicated to not through specifically memories or visuals of people, but of color, and color that allows them to understand or feel meaning. I've also had people, I don't want to say summoning the dead, but they'll like come into communication with someone who has passed, or they will sit with a younger version of themselves and integrate the exile. I love that you brought that up earlier, or the shadow, the exiled part. Will be able to commune with the self and kind of welcome that part back in. Some of my clients who I've worked with one-on-one for a longer period of time, they'll actually be able to tell me before a session, this is what I'm wanting to focus on. And because we've worked together for a while, I can just tailor and guide based on that. And then also the other really powerful thing that I've witnessed with breath work is it's kind of like ultraviolet light, in the way that it can shine light on a part of the body. And then you'll start, and then it's almost like by focusing, like I'm going here because one of my clients she held, there was a block here, there was energy here that had to be felt. Similarly, another client that I worked with who couldn't touch her legs and she wasn't sure why. And then we were able to explore with breathing why that was. Yeah. And one of my male clients who like felt this kind of almost like a plug in his solar plexus. And then we were able to just using visuals, sync through that and see what this block was. So there's, well, I think when you describe it like that, it's like, that sounds bananas. But it's real. Like our bodies are scrapbooks, they're energetic organisms, and with memories and stories and all the versions of us that have lived in this life prior to the versions that's like of Iona and Emma who are talking today. And it's all in here. And breathwork is a very cool way that we can drop into that. Even like archetypes, like kind of like with Carl Jung, like people will see things similarly, like between people, like symbols or animals, that kind of stuff. I love that. The other thing that's like really cool is that sometimes I can see when someone's working with something, but I won't necessarily know at all what it is. And then they'll come back and they'll be like, let me tell you, like, I just fought the Vikings and I released something. I just released something around my dad. I'm like, love it.
Oh my God, I love that. Yeah, I've got head to toe goosebumps. Because I really believe that, like, I'm a massive advocate for everything we need is inside of us. You know, we don't need something external of us to access these levels. And I get that some people, probably not people that listen to this podcast, but some people are, you know, so conditioned and shut down that, you know, ayahuasca and those sort of things are the fast road to sort of cracking themselves open. But I believe that there are so much, because I know, because of my experience with meditation and even the light experience that I've had with breathwork, the fact that my ego had such significant resistance to it, to me, is hugely curious. You know, like, why would you be so resistant to this? Because all I'm doing is shutting my eyes or breathing. So I feel like that there is, in that in itself sort of says to me that there is so much depth in the simplicity of things like breathwork and meditation. And that, you know, when we start to learn these practices, that if we can just, and you know, stay in the room, like just be with the discomfort, because the other side of the discomfort, I think this is where we do really experience our most mystical selves and, you know, connected selves and all of those things. And yeah, I mean, bring that on. I love all that stuff.
Yeah. I love what you said about, this is another thing, I'm sort of minimalist in many ways. And I just love the idea that the tool is here.
Yeah.
Like the tool is the breath, the answers are here. And I'm not in any way against, so just like for transparency, never done plant medicine, never really done any drugs in any way. And I'm not saying ayahuasca's bad or microdosing at all. Like, go for it. And like I said, I think that anything can be good.
Yeah.
But from being in this work for a while now, I see, to your point around like, oh, well, I'll just go do this and I'll be forced into an initiation with something. And I'm not saying that that's not consent based. And even like the idea of consent, I think it's fairly, like, we understand what that means. We think we do, but like consent with ourselves in terms of what is available to be revealed.
Yeah.
Because sometimes just like diving into the absolute intensity and depths of the worst experiences potentially that you've had and being confronted by them, and then not necessarily having tools to integrate those things after the fact, I'm not sure if that's healing. That feels like I'm not sure if it is. And again, I'm not saying, like I said, it's all
I'm
good,
totally with you.
But there's intensity that I've seen people to be able to experience with breathwork, or intensity that they've been able to build to with breathwork through consistent pushing out of their own boundaries. And it feels very consensual, very self-referenced, very, very like to the point of staying in the room. Yes, stay in the room, but do you know what? We can pull back on the breath.
Exactly.
If it's feeling too much, we can lean in if we want to. There's just a bit more of being able to kind of turn your own levers, which I think is a very
and build
cool
trust
thing.
in yourself. I think that's one of the big things for me. And I'm not against anything, you know, like I'm like whatever floats your boat. And I've tried most things. I've not done ayahuasca, but I've pretty much done everything else. So but one of the big pieces for me is that the moment we go external of ourselves, we're giving away our power, we're giving away our responsibility. And again, sometimes that's fine, but what I would like, my vision for all of us is that we fully know in each and every one of ourselves that everything we need is within us. We can create our transformations, we can heal ourselves, we can rewire our brains, we can have mystical experiences, we can connect to God, universe, spirit, whatever it is. And I love what you said as well. Like, we can, tap the brakes if we need to tap the brakes, or we can hit the accelerator. And I know for me, this has been something that's really powerful in my life, because almost in every area of my life, I have this ability to push myself, and to use your word, with total consent outside of my comfort zone on a daily basis.
Yes.
Like, literally, I was with my PT this morning, and I'm just like, I want to push myself harder here. I want to go a bit harder. And that's not because she's pushed me. It's because I've chosen. And I really believe that when we sit in the driver's seat, when we sit in the power seat, then we are so much capable of so much more. But the moment we and we need to give our power away. We need to give our power away sometimes to experts that know more than us, that have greater experience, that can hold space for us, that have the wisdom, the experience. Like, we absolutely have to do those things too. But what I am really passionate about is I want everyone to go right back to where you started. Like, the power lies within you. So whoever you need to hold space or to support you, or, if you do need an ayahuasca journey, by all means, but know that all of that is accessible within you. Even if you don't, like, one of my missions is I want to have an ayahuasca experience. And my coach has actually said to me, we're going to have this ayahuasca experience without ever taking any plant medicine. I'm like, fucking sign me up. Because again, that puts me back in that place where I'm like, I know it's inside of me and I know that I can access it. I'm just not exactly sure how yet, but I'm going to work it out. And when we have that sort of curiosity and belief in ourselves, it can't help but leak into every area of our lives. We get really good at taking imperfect action. We get really good at backing ourselves. We get really good at, winning or learning. We don't worry about failure anymore, because we know that everything we need is inside of us, and it doesn't look perfect and it's never going to be perfect, but the fun is making the mess. A big part of my life, especially as a line 3, I'm a messy human being. That's what I do. I experiment. I throw shit at walls. I see what happens if I do this and add that. So yeah, I think breath work is one of those things for me that I think we can start to have these beautiful, deep, mystic connections to ourselves, to the universe, to the quantum, whatever your belief system is, in a way that we do still get to do it from a place of, with our own power and our own ability to tap the brakes or to accelerate at our own choosing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. I like to think I'm deeply spiritual, but with my feet firmly on the ground.
Yeah.
I'll go there. I love all of this. But I'm also I pride myself in also being a practical human being.
Says every line 3 ever. Yes. This is what we do, right? This is exactly what we do. And it's that. So my husband, Justin, he'll often be like, oh my God, I want to go to Mars. He wants to be on the freaking plane that goes to Mars. I'm like, why? We have this amazing planet right here, and even when I'm learning or I'm diving into all the different dimensions, I don't dive into all the different dimensions because I'm necessarily so excited to learn them. I dive into them because I love planet Earth. I fucking love human beings. So I'm like, okay, how can we add to this experience? So yeah, I totally resonate. But anyway, we have chatted for a while and I've got to let you go. So how can people find you? We're going to put everything in the show notes, but how can people find you?
Sure. So I'm Iona Holloway on Instagram. But you can also go to the App Store and download Soul Breathwork, and you can try it for free for 7 days. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about it, any experiences with it. I'd love to hear all of that. And then you can also find my book, Ghost: Why Perfect Women Shrink. It's on Amazon.
That sounds fascinating. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation. Thank you for the session that we did together. I don't think it will be our last. So yeah, and thanks for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Emma. This was a joy. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I trust you've enjoyed our conversation, and I look forward to having you on the next podcast. Bye for now.
Thanks everyone for being here all the way to the end of the podcast. I hope you got lots of value out of it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. Could I please ask that you share this podcast with friends if you found it valuable? And also, bonus points, could you leave a review for me as well on Apple? It would be greatly appreciated. If at any point you would like to be on the podcast, or you've got questions that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, by all means get on my socials and DM me. Everything you need is there in the show notes. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.